and let us all do we can to build a better future. Hey everyone, this is Kit Cabello with Hard Lens Media, live here in the city of Chicago, and today we are joined by someone that corporate politicians say he's too mean on social media. Cul-de-sac progressives tell him to fall in line and be quiet, and of course there are corporate media pundits who say that he's a feral succubus. That's right, joining us here in the city of Chicago is Chicago's very own Jimmy Dore. Jimmy Dore, welcome to
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, and it's really great to be back in Chicago. I miss the humidity.
Speaking of which, I want to start this interview off a little different. Nothing about politics. It's going to be about you. So, when it comes down to COVID-19, everyone was on lockdown. And now, finally, you're back on tour. You're touring all across the country, visiting different cities, having different guests, co-hosts with you and Steph. What does it mean to you to be back on tour again, doing what you love? And what is it like seeing the fans again after all this time?
Well, it's exhilarating, honest. While I like doing the show in the studio, but there's no comparison to doing the show live in front of a live audience, especially, I mean, those people are raucous. They're hungry for a show like that, and it's really an exhilarating experience all around. The thing that is kind of unfortunate is because of COVID, we can't really do meet and greets. So I used to do one show a night, and then I would spend a couple hours after the show meeting everybody and taking pictures. And just because of the Delta variant and all that other kind of stuff, and so we're just can't do that anymore. So we do a second show now instead, which is also very fun. So that second show last night was a blast. And we get to do more material, and I like to do like at least a 2-hour show, and so we got to do 4 hours of material last night in front of a live crowd, so that was really worth it. So I really, Aaron Mate was on the show last night in Chicago, and he actually did meet the people. He went out there for a little while and shook hands and took pictures, and especially for him, he said he gets hit with the negative so much. He never gets to meet people who are his supporters and his fans. And he gets so many detractors because he's doing good journalism. And when you do good journalism, you make a lot of powerful enemies. And so for him, he went out and met with them because he needed to get that. He doesn't get that often. So that was great. And they gave him a standing ovation. You saw. I mean, the people love Aaron Mate. So it's been great.
One last personal thing as well. Hard Lens Media, we were there at Talia Hall. The whole crew was there. And we've seen your show there 2 times before. But, of course, 2020... you had to cancel. A lot of people had to cancel their tours. But why does Talia Hall stand out to you? What's important about that location? What does it mean to you as an individual to do a show there?
Well, when I started comedy, I moved to 19th and Jefferson, which is in Pilsen. And so Talia Hall is there, and it's kind of a symbol of that neighborhood. And so it just makes me feel good. It's a real triumph for me to come. When I used to live in this tiny apartment that was $300 a month, and had a step-up bathroom. I mean, but I loved it. It was one of the happiest times of my life. I had moved to 19th and Jefferson. There was a bunch of comedians who lived in that area, Steve Seagrin, and just a bunch of really funny people. It was like a little artist community. And because it was affordable, right, and it was right near downtown, I mean, it was great. I mean, I grew up around Midway Airport, so I loved living this close to the city and all the comedy clubs that were here. There was an Improv, there was a Zanies, there was the Funny Firm. I mean, those are all gigantic, big clubs, fun, and there was more clubs than that even. So it means a lot to come back and play Thalia Hall. It's a real kick.
Well, it was a hell of a show, and I'm glad that at least I saw the first show. One of our team members saw the second show, so it was great all around, and I'm pretty sure the second show brought the ruckus. So now moving on towards another thing that happened while you were here in Chicago, or at least you spoke to somebody in an interview, Ben Jarowski, who was basically telling you in that live stream, maybe if you brought the ruckus to the GOP and Republicans. And, of course, Hard Lens Media, we've got our fair share of criticism, too, by saying from people saying, oh, you got to be, you got to hold the Republicans accountable. Why are you always being mean to Democrats and progressives? What do you say to critics that are saying that you are just only focusing on Democrats and on Republicans? It almost seems like weird favoritism just to protect the progressives who still don't deliver on anything.
I think if there's one thing we didn't need in the last 4 years was more Trump criticism. It was coming from everybody, and the people who were criticizing Trump were doing it in a very superficial way, and they weren't doing it in the way they should have. It wasn't a systemic critique, because Donald Trump was a pretty average Republican president, and he was less of a warmonger than the Democrats, and he had deported way less people than the Democrats. So all this idea that he was some kind of fascist. And by the way, I criticized Donald Trump. I told every time he would do something that was egregious, like when he passed that tax cut bill, I was like, now, if you voted for Donald Trump, you got to admit to yourself you were a chump, that Donald Trump took you for a ride. He's not giving you anything he said he was going to give you. He's not giving you health care, and the government's not paying for it, right? He's not making sure you have good jobs. He's not doing... And so what is he doing? He's giving $1 trillion to the richest people in the country, while he doesn't give you student debt relief, while he doesn't give you a living wage, while he doesn't give you a public option or health care. So... I've said that also, but the focus of I don't think the problem in America is that we have a right-wing party. The problem is we don't have a left-wing party. And so I think that once people wake up to that fact, change can happen. People on the left already think the Republican Party is the evil, racist, misogynistic, all that bad. They already. Why would I need to? So what they are asking for is, can you give me some porn? Can you give me some hate porn? We all, you know how I hate the Republicans. Can you just give me some hate porn? And I'm like, that's boring. That's low hanging fruit. And I'm going to give more of a systemic critique. And the critique is that we don't have an opposition party in the United States. And everybody knows what the Republicans are, but nobody really knows what the Democrats are. And what's happening through Forced to Vote, and what happened through with the Squad and the Justice Democrats, is now it's being revealed that even the people who espouse and give, well, Chris Hedges talked about it, that and so did Thomas Frank in Listen Liberal. They talk about how they know all the words of progressivism and democracy. They know how to pay fealty to democracy, liberty, and equality. But then they go and legislate exactly against those things. And that's exactly what we're seeing. Joe Biden, when he ran, what did he run on? He ran on a fifth. So when I did that interview with Ben, how do you say his last name? Jablonski? Ben Jablonski. He was trying to convince me that it was the Republicans who are standing in the way of all, because we share the common goals. Ben and I share, we all want a living wage. We all want Medicare for all. We all want to end the wars. We all want student debt relief. We all want the drug war to end. So we had the same goals, but he just wants to spend time pretending it's the Republicans standing in the way. He goes, those people are working against you. I go, the people who are standing in my way of those things are the Democrats and Joe Biden right now. They have complete control of government, and they could give us all those things. They're not. Joe Biden ran on those things, and he's not doing it. So this idea that it's the Republicans who are obstructing this, it's a one-party rule. What is that quote about the Americans have one party, but in normal American extravagance, they have two of them? Right? They have one right-wing party, but they have two of it. Something like that. I'm butchering the hell out of that quote. But so that's my answer to that. And when I said to Ben that it's Joe Biden's the president right now, and he's the one denying me those things, he could do it with a stroke of the pen, he didn't really have a comeback for that, because that's a fact. Joe Biden could give us all Medicare for all right now through Section 1881A, which says all you have to do is declare an emergency, which there is. This is a pandemic. It's a national emergency, and you could give everybody Medicare for all, just like they did in a town somewhere, I think in Montana. There was a chemical spill. The federal government came in and gave a whole town has Medicare for all. Which is exactly what Barack Obama could have did to Flint, Michigan, and he didn't do it inexplicably. So the problem, again, so to me, I think that's a really sophomoric view of things. Is like, hey, how do we, why don't you make fun of why don't you rip into the Republicans? Hey, how about if I rip into the system that gives us all this shit stuff? And that's what I'm doing. And right now, the problem is we don't have an opposition party in America. Nancy Pelosi serves the oligarchs just like Chuck Schumer, just like Mitch McConnell, just like Donald Trump. They agreed on all the big stuff. They gave Donald Trump $132 billion extra dollars a year to do war. That's not $132 billion extra dollars once. That's $132 billion every year in perpetuity. That's an extra $1 trillion in 8 years that we could end homelessness with that money 10 times over. They just don't want to do it. So the political will isn't there, which is why the United States is slipping into being like Brazil. And if you want to go keep criticizing the people everybody already hates, that's not going to get us anywhere. What's going to get us everywhere is when people realize that both parties are in bed with the exact same donor class, and we live in a rapacious oligarchy. And until people start withholding their votes for Democrats, nothing will change. That's what Lawrence O'Donnell said.
To quote Joe Biden, he said nothing will fundamentally change, and nothing has. So then moving on to another subject, and speaking of, I guess, pornography in many ways, there's the feel-good pornography that we see tweets from the progressive members in Congress who say, what does $15 minimum wage mean to you? What does Medicare for all mean to you? But when they're challenged on it, especially by reporters like, for example, Max Blumenthal of the Gray Zone. Mind you, the Gray Zone was in the fight for its life. They were fighting against a lawsuit that was unjust, and that if it went another way, it would have been a huge blow to free speech. Then it was Aaron Mate, who was smeared by the middle-aged McCarthyites. When it comes on to challenge these progressives, why is it that they're, especially progressive members in Congress or in the Senate like Bernie Sanders, why is it that we have these cul-de-sac progressives who have these large media networks, but they don't challenge the very people who fail to follow through with any of their campaign promises? In 2020, they promised us the moon, and they didn't deliver anything. Why is it that the cul-de-sac progressives and these progressive leaders in Congress smear journalists that are critical of them and smear them? Why are these elected members so protected?
I mean, I don't know exactly why. I mean, I think you just need to make the observation like you did, that's what they do. That's what like Ryan Grimm at The Intercept, right? I've exposed him as running interference for the squad all over the place, right? So he wants to maintain his access to them, and so they have a cozy relationship. Like you saw when she went for her AOC went for the interview about Forced to Vote. She didn't come on a real progressive show to answer. She didn't go on Kyle Kalinski's show, the founder of the Justice Democrats, to answer questions about Forced to Vote. She went on The Intercept with Jeremy Scahill, who doesn't know how to ask a follow-up question apparently, and gave her a softball interview on purpose. It was obvious. And I don't know how you could do that and not be embarrassed. But they're not embarrassed because they all hang in circles where they all pat each other on the back. I mean, how can you still work at an organization that's pro-censorship and you call yourself a journalist? That's ridiculous. Have some dignity, have some character, and stand up against censorship. But they don't do that at The Intercept. So they're all shit libs. I mean, you tell me why. It's all self-interest. Now, Ryan Grimm gets paid by not one billionaire. He gets a check from 2 different billionaires. You tell me why he's running interference for politicians. So because he is the establishment. So why the regular shit libs with the MSNBC contracts do it? I think that answers itself. They have MSNBC contracts, and they know if they were just like the Young Turks. I just saw Glenn Greenwald make this point, which is a great point, that Jeffrey Katzenberg decided to give Jeffrey Katzenberg, one of the richest men in all of media, one of the top DNC donors, the definition of the establishment oligarchy, decided to give $20 million to the Young Turks. Why? Because he didn't see them as a threat. If they were actually a threat, if they were actually going to upset the system, he wouldn't be giving them $20 million. He saw them as a nice way that he could shore up the left with his own media company, and that's what he did. So they're not left. Like people like Cenk Uygur and Anna Kasparian, they've revealed, especially in the last 6-7 months since I turned my spotlight on them, that their flex is right wing. Their flex is neocon. They're imperialists. They'll spread misinformation about war, which is the most horrific thing you could do as a progressive. What are we doing? We're bombing brown people all over the fucking world, and they're repeating CIA talking points and the pretext for doing so uncritically, even when it's been pointed out to them that they're lying. So those people that's their flex. If you grow up with corporate lawyer parents and you've never had to work for anything, it's poverty which informs my politics. I grew up drinking powdered milk till I was in 5th grade, right? I was the youngest of 12 kids. And so, I had one little sister we adopted, but, we grew up poor, right? My dad we didn't have dual income. My mom didn't work. She had to take care of the family. So I think that informs you. And those people who grow up without that kind of struggle and without seeing their friends struggle. I mean, if you don't have a friend who couldn't afford their medicine or had to forego a doctor visit because they couldn't afford their $10,000 deductible, So those people don't know those kind of people. You know, Cenk Uygur makes $350,000 a year. He lives in a $4 million house. Nothing wrong with that, but it just you're out of touch when you do that for like the last 15 years, like he's been doing. So, you know, I'm out there pressing the flesh. I'm out there doing comedy in nightclubs, meeting regular people all the time. And I am a regular person, you know. I myself went bankrupt not too long ago from medical bills. My family was put through the ringer for that. My wife's worked 30 years as a teacher. I've worked 30 years as a comedian and a radio show host and a writer. And so we've put our time in, we've paid our dues, and we know what it's like to struggle. And so that's what really informs my politics. And I still meet people who are struggling every day. I meet military people. I meet veterans who come to my shows who tell me how thank you for telling the truth about the wars. Thank you for keeping it honest, and thank you for keeping it real. And I've had people military people try to give me their medals. And of course I couldn't accept them, but so that's what informs what I do, you know, of living a certain way for 50 years. And I think that's what informs what they do. They didn't live a certain way, you know. They didn't have those struggles. They didn't follow those challenges. You know, they all went to Ivy League schools. I didn't go to Ivy League schools. I couldn't afford that. So, and so I think that's, and you see the problem with the left, and I think Forced to Vote exposed it, was that the left, half the left doesn't really give a shit about lefty progressive goals. They care more about high school politics, you know, and trying to one-up each other because they don't need. So those people with MSNBC contracts, they don't care if Medicare for All passes. They don't care if we get a living wage. Those people don't even know anybody who needs a minimum wage. Those people, like I said, if those kind of people ever got within 5 feet of a worker, they'd get punched in the face. So I'd like to go organize, go try to organize. Well, you know, and those people, those are the same people who say we need to organize along class lines. And they're explicitly bullshitting you when they say that. Because when you're going to organize along class lines, that means you're going to organize with Trump voters who are in the same class as you. And those people aren't ever going to even talk to those people. They have nothing but derision in them. They have nothing but contempt for those people. They call them deplorables. So they don't understand how to organize along class lines whatsoever. And the people who do know how to do it, the people who, like me, who've been in unions since I was in fucking college, I do know how to do it. And the way you organize is you don't go to the union floor and go, hey, who here is a right winger? Who here is a boogaloo boy? Who here is a proud boy? Who here is a libertarian gun nut? Who's a Trump voter? You're all out. Now I'm going to organize with these class people. That's not how class organization works, right? I showed you the examples of in Las Vegas. It was the Black Panthers joining hands literally to walk with the KKK to protest the welfare checks being withheld by the governor, and they knew that if the Black Panthers didn't get their checks, the poor white people weren't going to get them either. So they walked hand in hand and they shut down the strip in Las Vegas, and they got their checks. That's what organizing along class lines means. It's like we disagree on a lot of stuff, but we have a common interest. So just like Chris Hedges says, there are no permanent allies. There are only permanent interests.
I think that's a good note to end it on was there. But I do want to ask you a question that you've been asked for the past 2 months and asked to deal with your old friends, the Young Turks. And so I just want to rewind back the clocks to 2016. It wasn't too long ago where, again, TYT was the network on YouTube, on social media, where a lot of progressives and independents went to. Then they get the $20 million of Katzenberg cash. But before they got the Katzenberg cash, they got that huge boost by interviewing Bernie Sanders and then constantly promoting progressive issues, progressive policies. But when they got that $20 million, when did you notice the change take place? And was it always there in the first place? Was it always for them to just take some kind of big check and then just get fat off it? Or was there just a general change with the people, the atmosphere? I know it's personal for you because, you know, this means a lot because you were there at TYT almost from the beginning, but since then there has been a change.
Well, Cenk Uygur's flex has always been conservative, right? And that's not a bad thing if you're a conservative, but it is if you pretend to be a progressive and you're leading some kind of movement, which they're not. They're not leading they're leading a fundraising movement for their own fucking paychecks. That's what the Young Turks are leading. And did I see a change? Dude, they couldn't wait to drop supporting Bernie Sanders. That's why I became so popular, because I was the last guy at the Young Turks who was still supporting Bernie Sanders, and I was excited that we were going to take it all the way to the convention. And the Young Turks threw Bernie under the fucking bus in like February. Like, they were done with him. Right? And so that's why I stood out on the Young Turks, and I became popular, and my show Behind a Paywall was by 10 times the most popular member show at the Young Turks, and they knew it. And so their flex has always been that way, and then the money just, Noam Chomsky talks about how you do self-censoring and how you like that you wouldn't be you wouldn't be in that journalist job if you didn't believe the things you were saying, because they go, well, I'm not I believe everything I say. Of course you do. That's why Jeffrey Katzenberg gave you the money. That's why, because he knows that you believe everything you say, and what you're saying is this. Cenk Uygur says now the CIA needs to be tougher. We need more. I don't know if you saw that video. That was crazy. Yes, I did. That was nuts. That the CIA isn't doing enough, and they're too soft. I mean, what kind of a maniac? And then he pushes the CIA talking points on Syria, on Libya. He was happy that Libya. I mean, they've always been this way. Plus, so that's why they got that money. And they then consciously, I was told, and I'm not making this up, by an executive at the Young Turks, that we know that we have to move towards the center. And that's when they told us we had to stop swearing. We had to start wearing suit coats. Now, I think they stopped telling people they had to wear suit coats, but they still don't. They're not allowed to swear. So they became what they were supposed to be the antidote to. And the money really, I think, accelerated that for sure. And so now, I mean, did you see Anna Kasparian come out against the homeless? I mean, that was she's talking about homeless people as if they're a crime and if they're a criminal, instead of the system that creates homeless people is the crime, and those are the criminal. It's just nuts, right? So again, there never a systemic critique from them ever. Because they don't get it. They cul-de-sac babies, grew up rich, went to Ivy League schools, and they're just Anna's just a disgusting person. She's just a garbage person. If you want to see what a narcissistic personality disorder looks like, watch Anna Kasparian. And by the way, they'll never apologize. They've still never apologized for smearing Julian Assange. They've never apologized for smearing Aaron Mate, and of course they're never going to apologize for trying to smear me with that phony #MeToo thing that it was laughable. Hey, if you're going to try to smear somebody on a sexual harassment charge, I think you should both probably tell the same story. The fact that you tell two totally different stories kind of ruins it. They couldn't even do that, and now people have told me that, because I'm so hated by the Democratic Party because I tell the truth about them, that people in their Democratic circles are angry at them because this was the big bullet that they were supposed to launch at me, and they did it in such a clumsy way that now it won't work on me anymore. So they blew it. So this was their one. I mean, the establishment has been you've seen them come at me. How many hit pieces have they done on me, right? How many times have they made me trend on Twitter negatively because I'm doing good work, right? I'm getting Tucker Carlson to agree that Julian Assange is not a criminal but a journalist who needs to be saved, which was a big deal. That made me trend negatively on Twitter when I'm out there getting half the country to hear a progressive point of view and I'm protecting journalism. Somehow that's a bad thing because I'm doing it in the wrong place, because half the country is supposed to be off limits now. You're going to get a scarlet letter if you're seen talking to them and dealing with them as human beings. So they were always that way, and the money accelerated it.
I think that's the sad truth about TYT. Now, speaking of Tucker Carlson, let's actually talk about Tucker Carlson. He has a large network on Fox News. He has a huge social media following. Explain to people, like, again, why do you go on Tucker Carlson's show? Because I think constantly you're being attacked by a lot of people on the left because, oh, well, you're just helping promote Tucker Carlson. You're just trying to give cover to Tucker Carlson. Explain to people for the umpteenth time, why do you show up on Tucker Carlson's show to talk about progressive issues and progressive policies?
When people see me on Tucker Carlson and they get angry that Jimmy Dore, who's a progressive, is on Tucker Carlson, why would you do that? Because I was always taught the idea was to go change people's hearts and minds with your progressive ideas because they're clearly better for everyone. And so when I go on Tucker Carlson, I have an agenda. And I'm using the Tucker Carlson show to get my agenda out there. And it's been very useful. I've had a lot, of course, I don't know if you know, but I have a lot of people say, hey, I don't agree with your politics, but I do agree with you on Julian Assange. Or I don't agree with your politics, but you changed me on single payer. I don't agree with your politics, but I get it on a minute living wage. And we got to end these wars. So people who normally think they would disagree with me because the media tells them to, when they hear me talk, they're like, oh, no, that makes sense. And that's what we should be doing. We should be trying to change people's hearts and minds with the strength of our arguments, not by demonizing half the country, which is what they want to do. So when I go on Tucker Carlson, what I tell people is, you shouldn't get angry that I'm on Tucker Carlson. You should get angry that I'm not on Rachel Maddow or Chris Hayes or fake tough guy Lawrence O'Donnell's or Chris Cuomo's show or Anderson. Why don't they have on anti-war voices? Why don't they have on voices that are supported of Julian Assange? Why don't they have on real progressives who are going to critique the left? Why that? I would love to go on those shows. See, that's the part that people leave out. They act like they think I'm picking the shows I go on. I'll go on all those shows because I want my message to reach the biggest audience possible, which is why you go on shows, is to try to get your message out. Those people don't want my message out. That's who they should be angry at. But of course they're not. They'd rather see Rachel Maddow and Chris Hayes interview CIA people, literally from the CIA, without critiquing them. They don't bring on someone to tell you who are the CIA guys lying. They bring you the CIA guy on as if he's telling you the truth. So, again, it's backwards and fucked up, and that's why the country's in the place that there is. There's no left in America. Forced to vote proved that. I started a thing called Let's Get a Vote on America for All, which is something the left has agreed on since 1994. And then as soon as it became possible to do, half the left showed that they are actually establishment lapdogs, and they attacked Forced to Vote, and they attacked me personally, and they tried to make it look, and that's why it was all bad faith attacks. Till this day, there is still not an argument to not do Forced to Vote. In fact, every time somebody from the squad talks, they reinforce the idea that they should be doing Forced to Vote. I don't know if you saw around the eviction moratorium, all the speeches they gave, they were saying, we got to use our leverage, we got to use our power, we have to confront power, but they'll never use their leverage, and they'll never confront Nancy Pelosi. And that's the fact.
Now, let's address the elephant in the room, and that is the legacy of Senator from Vermont, Bernie Sanders, the progressive that basically started a whole movement in 2016, made more people self-aware about how we're living in a neoliberal nightmare. But since then, the fight in him has disappeared, and he's constantly compromising. And throughout 2020, he kept on calling Joe Biden his good friend, turning a blind eye to the smears that were happening to Tulsi Gabbard, who risked her career in 2016 to endorse him, and he never returned anything back in favor. What are your thoughts now on Bernie Sanders and his progressive legacy in the United States, and how it either derailed the progressive movement or how it's going to help the progressive movement? What are your thoughts on Bernie now that basically he did 2 presidential runs, and twice the DNC committed election fraud, denied him the nomination, which he never, ever truly challenged?
Well, as Kyle Kalinske, the co-founder of the Justice Democrats, said, Bernie's a cuck. Bernie's... I mean, and it brings me absolutely no joy to say this. I wish Bernie was what he presented himself to be, a revolutionary. He's not. He's an establishment shill, just like all the rest of them. He's a sheepdog for the Democratic Party, and he's got zero fight in him. He'll never fight for anything, and he's proven it. He voted for the largest upward transfer of wealth in human history without fighting one little bit. In fact, they lied and said that he was the one who got the unemployment stuff into the bill with that grandstanding speech, which he didn't. Michael Bennet wrote that part of the bill, and it was already agreed to before Bernie gave that speech. He gave that speech to confuse people into making it look like he was fighting for people, while what he was actually doing was selling you out at nuclear speed and voting for the largest upward transfer of wealth in human history. That's what happens. That's when you elect progressives inside the Democratic Party to Congress. They vote for the largest upward transfer of wealth in human history, and Bernie Sanders is just a sheep. I mean, watch the interview he did with Kyle and Crystal. Well, Kyle wasn't there. Kyle had to sit in the corner and watch Bernie fuck his show because Bernie got upset that Kyle called him a cuck. So I guess what Bernie did was made Kyle cuck him back, right? So Kyle had to sit in the corner and watch Bernie jizz all over his show. So that was funny. But Crystal did, she asked him, and it was just completely revealing because, I mean, I don't know why Bernie wanted to go on that show. I have no idea why Bernie wanted to be asked those questions unless he got paid to. I mean, why the fuck would, it just seems ridiculous. Of course, I'm joking when I said that he got paid to do that interview. Of course he didn't. But it was so bizarre. It was like listening to Chuck Schumer. I mean, you saw it, right? Wasn't it? It was... I mean, all I have to do is I played it, and a riot almost started at the show last night. People were screaming the whole time. They couldn't. They fucking wanted to rip the screen down. I mean, So this again. This people will try to make it like this is Jimmy Dore having a problem with Bernie Sanders when it's actually the progressives, the street level progressives. No, Bernie has turned his back on us, and he's nothing but a sheepdog for the Democratic Party. And he's instead of pushing Joe Biden left and using his leverage, which he has a ton of it. Bernie Sanders has a ton of power and leverage. He has as much power as Joe Manchin. Isn't that amazing? You would never know it. You would never know that Bernie has as much power as Joe Manchin because Bernie refuses to use it because, as Kyle Kalinske says, he's a cuck, which means he's a spineless, nutless wonder who will never fight against the establishment. In fact, he knows all the words. He started every speech in 2016 by saying, "We need a revolution." Sounds like you guys are ready for a revolution. And the question I wanted to ask him, which I never got a chance to ask him, was, you didn't really mean that? Right? Because how could you say you want a revolution and then endorse Joe Biden? That's the opposite of what that is. And by the way, you say he built a movement. There was a movement of people waiting to do something. He would never, just like Barack Obama disbanded his movement once as soon as he got elected, Bernie Sanders disbanded his movement once he dropped out of the primaries. He'll never ask his people to get in the streets. He'll never ask his movement to go do a direct action. He'll never say do a moratorium, meaning do a rent strike. He'll never use. He's not. So his movement is like when I was at the Medicare for All march. Where was Bernie Sanders? He won't even show up at a march for Medicare for All, his signature issue. That's what a cuck he is to the establishment right now. That's how hard he's selling out working people. Bernie Sanders couldn't give a shit about you. And if he did, he would fight. He cares about himself, just like all politicians, just like Chris Hedges tells us. Most people who are attracted to politics are mediocre narcissists in the first place. And Bernie Sanders is proving that in spades right now. In spades.
We can never forget what happened in Philly. Never forget that there was election fraud and how so many people had hope, but he let them all down.
Bernie Sanders never made the DNC change after they cheated us. They never got rid of the superdelegates. They never got rid of the corporate money. So they never had to pay a price. They never had that, so that's why we're left with Joe Biden.
And Joe Biden, who said nothing will fundamentally change. But remember, Bernie Sanders said that's his good friend throughout the debates. Speaking of the Biden-Harris administration, already the Biden presidency, Harris herself, their popularity is falling down. Vice President Kamala Harris has become one of the most in history. And the thing is, we all can't forget what happened during the debates where Tulsi Gabbard, during that, I think the CNN debate, just derailed her campaign, and then of course, Kamala Harris had to wait to become Biden's VP. Now, as we enter into 2022 and going into 2024, what are your thoughts on the Democratic Party and how they're going to even try and once again regain progressives or browbeat progressives into the party? Is it time now truly for a third-party movement? And if so, how are we going to get there when there are so many state laws that are preventing third parties from being on the ballot and being on the debate stage?
So what the Democrats are going to do in 2024 is they're going to run against Trump again. I mean, they're running against Trump in 2022. I mean, they haven't stopped talking about Trump. So they want to talk about January 6th. That's all they want to talk about, January 6th. I mean, it's just crazy. That's going to be their strategy again. It's like there's a guy who's worse than us. I'm telling people that if you have a conscience, you have to withhold your vote from the Democratic Party, just as Lawrence O'Donnell said. If you ever want to pull the Democratic Party to the left, you have to show them that you're willing to withhold your vote and your donations. So that's what I'm telling people. Stop donating to Democrats and stop voting for Democrats and start voting for independents. I'm affiliated with the People's Party, which is trying to organize along class lines. They're trying to organize along populist ideas that the populist left and populist right agree upon. What are those ideas? Ending the wars. We're also for $15 minimum wage, Medicare for all, student debt relief, ending the drug war. That's something the majority of people agree along class lines, left and right. So that's the kind of stuff I think we should be focusing on instead of identity politics, which is what the Democrats are doing in substitute for actually giving you economic policies that would help your life. So what I try to tell people is identity politics. A good way to think of it is they're not going to give you someone who's going to help you in your situation. They're going to give you someone who looks like you, who's going to help oppress you. That's what identity politics is.
Now, looking at how the Democrats constantly are protected by corporate media, by people who who have larger YouTube platforms, there is this massive wave of censorship that your channel's been dealing with, our channel's been dealing with. Matt Orfala's videos are being taken down. So many people on the Mikasa network are being deplatformed, demonetized. What is the future of independent media on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram? Will there be a chance for independent voices to remain on social media if corporate media and our corporate politicians continue to promote this massive wave of censorship, especially after January 6th?
So the censorship's coming from the left. There's an authoritarian left, and it's real, right? Like the Young Turks are very pro-censorship, very authoritarian, and there's satellites like David Dole and Mike Figueredo, Humanist Report. There's shit libs who are, very pro-Democratic Party and very pro-censorship, and they run interference for politicians, and so those are the types of people who make it dangerous and for all of us, right? They're the ones who jeopardize everybody's freedom of speech, right? And so you just saw Keith Olbermann, right? Keith Olbermann called for me to be deplatformed across every social network. What kind of a person wants to censor people? What kind of a grown-up wants to censor other grown-ups from a fucking social media platform? What kind of a crazy fascist right-wing flex is that? What kind of an authoritarian flex? And they're not even embarrassed to do it. Like they've been doing it to Trumpers for the last 5 years. So that's just their flex now. That's why the Young Turks can go, Aramatay's paid by the Russians with absolutely zero evidence or proof, just making it up out of whole cloth, because that's what they've been doing for the last 5 years. And there's no punishment, because when you lie at the behest of the establishment, there's never a punishment. And that's what the Young Turks do. That's what Ryan Grimm at The Intercept does. That's what all the shit libs with MSNBC contracts do on YouTube. And so the problem is YouTube is such a superior delivery system, right? It just is there's no other social media thing that compares with YouTube for video. There just isn't. And so there's a lot of people who are trying, and I'm all for it, like I'm on those other platforms, but they can pull the plug at any time, and as long as the Democrats are in power, get ready for more and more censorship. They brag about censoring independent news. So people don't understand that independent news on YouTube is a pain in their ass, right? They'd rather us not be there. They'd rather make money off of cat videos and cooking shows, which I love those too, and we cause them problems with their advertisers. Right, so that's just everybody has their advertiser problem, and they don't. So what happens is CNN, which we're their competition, and the New York Times, which we're their competition, we're doing better. We're getting better numbers, and we're stealing their audience. Right, people are sick and tired of establishment news, and so they come to YouTube and shows like ours. And so then we get a hit piece put on us by CNN and the New York Times to scare advertisers away from us, because we're their competition, and the advertisers fall for it. And so they try to make it look like everybody is a Nazi on YouTube, and so you better stop advertising on there. They literally put me in an article with Nazis and pedophiles, and so we're their competition, and they're the ones who are trying to get rid of us. And Google, and I understand, like, I don't think Google is doing it in an evil way. They're doing it strictly out of a business. We're a pain in their ass. And they got to suppress us so they can maintain their advertising revenue on all their other videos. And so I think it's just but that's how capitalism works, right? That's how capitalism becomes authoritarian. And here we are.
Jimmy, we're going to be wrapping up here, but I think for our viewers and subscribers, I think what a lot of them want to ask you is, what do we do going forward now? There's been a call for a general strike. There's also been talk for doing more attempts for force the vote. How can we continue to organize and continue to push back to fight for that better future so that, again, people are no longer stuck in this neoliberal nightmare? What needs to happen next?
So I think what needs to happen next, we need to get direct action. We need to have strikes. We need to get people, organized and interested. But I don't think that's going to happen until people realize that both political parties have abandoned them. And that's why I'm telling people that it would be better off if the Justice Democrats were not inside the Democratic Party and were not elected, because it gives people the false hope that there is somebody inside one of the political parties that are fighting for you. And so they can so as soon as until they realize that is not happening. That any vote for a Democrat is a vote for the establishment, because the squad has been going along with Nancy Pelosi's wishes 100%, and they will not challenge her, right? So if you vote for the squad and they go along with Nancy Pelosi, who controls Nancy Pelosi? Goldman Sachs, Raytheon, Eli Lilly, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and Exxon. So if you vote for them inside the Democratic Party, that's what you're voting for. So we've done stories like this on my show. The last 30 years, guess who's won every election? Goldman Sachs. So voting for someone inside the two corporate parties is a vote for Goldman Sachs, is a vote for the military-industrial complex, big pharma, health insurance, and fossil fuels. There's just no getting around that anymore. You can't. They all vote for the defense authorization. They all vote for the budgets. They don't challenge power. So until people realize that both political parties are never going to fight for you or do anything for you, no change can happen. And so that's what I'm trying to tell people. Stop voting for Democrats and Republicans and stop donating to Democrats and Republicans, and then we can take the next step. People have to wake up to that. It's a dead end inside the Democratic Party. As Shama Sawant, who's a socialist elected to the Seattle City Council, told me that if you're a progressive, the road for progressives inside the Democratic Party leads to a graveyard. And that was, she said that 5 years ago on my show, and that was prophetic. That is exactly right. If you're a Democrat, the road if you're a progressive, the road for you into the Democratic Party leads right to a graveyard. And you're seeing what's happening inside the Democratic Party. So we need to get people to realize that there is no hope inside the two corporate parties, and they are not fighting for you. And until that happens, if people still keep putting their energy into the Democratic Party, we won't have change. So I was urging people before the election of Hillary Clinton and Trump, I was saying, if a pollster calls you and asks you who you're voting for, tell them you're voting third party. And the reason why was because if the Green Party was polling at 10% and Hillary Clinton was polling at 40%, she needed that 10% to win the election. Do you see what I'm saying? But if everybody was so scared of Trump and they're like, I'd like to vote Green, but I can't this time because of Trump, well, that's exactly what they want. So we got Trump anyway. All the Bernie voters who got cheated by the DNC and Hillary Clinton got cheated, fraud committed against. If they would have made the DNC pay a price for that by withholding their vote from Hillary Clinton, we would have still got Donald Trump as president. But Hillary Clinton would have lost by 15%, and they couldn't do that shit again. But instead, everybody in Bernie said, vote for Hillary Clinton. We still got Donald Trump, and now we got Joe Biden, which is a worse candidate, which is a worse president than Hillary Clinton would have been. So we went backwards. So do you see what I'm talking about? So if everybody would now stop voting Democrat and the Democrats lost an election by 15 points, that's how we take control. And so because the People's Party is being based on populist ideas left and right, so now they're ideas that even right-wingers agree with, like ending the wars, minimum wage, single-payer health care, student debt relief, drug war, all that stuff they agree with. So now if you want, I'll vote for you if you're for those progressive ideas. I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican or a Green or a socialist. If you're for the things I'm for, I'll vote for you. Right? So now we have leverage. So that's how you have leverage. When the People's Party or a third party starts polling at 15%, you can get into the debates. You move the whole conversation left. You shift the whole body politic to the left if you start polling at 15%. And just imagine if Hillary Clinton would have lost by 15%, the different Democratic Party we'd have today. And so that's what I'm urging people to do, and that's how we get out of this.
Agree. We need to do a general strike, force the vote. Third parties are the way. We need to truly have a real direct democracy. So, final note for this question. First, we want to thank you so much for taking time out of your day while you're here in Chicago to be with us. But for those who don't know, for our viewers and subscribers who don't know where to find you, where can they go online to find you on social media and also see where they can watch you live on the show? And will you be coming back to Chicago anytime soon?
JimmyDoreComedy.com is my website. You can sign up for the membership program. You get all the extra videos, all that stuff. All our live dates are there. And I don't know what's happening with COVID, so we've kind of pulled back on booking stuff for the fall and the winter, and we want to see what's happening with how people are handling the masks mandates and the vaccine passes and all that stuff. So we're just going to wait and see how it works. But JimmyDoreComedy.com, so everybody can follow me there.
Great note to end it on. My name is Kit Gabel, the host of Heartlands Media. We're here with Chicago's very own Jimmy Dore. And if you want to choose to be violent on social media, be careful how you use your adverbs, pronouns, nouns, adjectives, verbs, all that good stuff. Peace and take care.